Okay, in our last episode, the exciting thing was that my alarm went off. um, let's see. Oh, I think I was at doing my apple again and bringing in some darker red over a little bit of darker red over the whole thing, and then adding to it. So you see how I'm just sort of gradually building up this value change in a gradual way, and without getting too much into light and form and shadow and whatnot. It's helping to build the appearance of a rounded form. I'm going to do a similar thing over here, and technically this is not exactly, it's not, obviously not spherical. A mug has a lot of spherical sort of aspects to it, but I'm going to treat it now, as I'm continuing to go into it, a little more cylindrical, so this whole side I'm going to try to leave a little bit lighter and then gradually gradate to a darker blue. So I think I've done a light passive blue and a little bit darker passive, the same peacock blue. I think for now I'm going to mix up a little bit more concentrated of the peacock blue. I'm emptying out this one well because I've changed over to the one next to it, so I'm trying to get all my money's worth out of this particular tube of paint. What I just did there was kind of interesting. I mean, if you do have a bunch of paint in your brush, I could certainly rinse that out, because I am going to want to get clear water, or I could squeeze out the rest of it and once again get the most out of my tube of paint. So for this, the mug that's partly cylindrical, sort of spherical on the lower half, but I am going to start out just with the idea that I'm going to leave this, what will be the left side, light. I don't want to change the darkness of that blue, but I do want to get a gradual transition to a darker blue. So I'm going to paint on some water, not too much, but I do want to make sure it's evenly distributed. I know it's hard to see clear water sometimes, oftentimes, maybe always, but you can turn it to the side and kind of see where it's, if you look at an angle, you can tell where it's wet and where it's not wet. So speaking of wet, this color that I'm bringing in is kind of too wet. What are you going to do about that, James? I'm not sure yet. But what I am going to try to do is remember that I'm going to leave out the handle this time. So this can all be kind of scary. Let me try this. Let's see. Since that area is wet, I don't want to do exactly, no. I may not have wanted to do that, but I'll deal with it. I was trying to just bring back some of the color, to not waste all of it. And I need to kind of finish the shape that I am dealing with. Let's see, and if I'm not including the handle, something like that. So as you can see, I mean, that dark color that sort of snuck over there that I may not have wanted to be there, it may end up that's exactly sort of how I want the values to change because of the shape and the form of the mug. But it would be nice to choose when I do that as opposed to the watercolor choosing when it gets to do it. I know that the whole thing is still pretty wet, so I'm gonna drop in a little bit more color on the right side of the mug, which is turning away from the light, so it's going to be darker. Still pretty wet color. At this point, I could call it good for this pass, or try to drop in a little bit more color. There's always a judgment call to be made about if it's worth trying to do more, or if it would be smarter to let it dry. And this is definitely just one style of watercolor painting. I mean, I certainly know that there's a lot more wild and wacky ways to do this, but I will say that I feel like the folks who know what they're doing when it's a lot more wet and splashy and flashy and crazy fun looking is one of the reasons that they know how to do that is because they've established an understanding and an experience, you know, just confidence in knowing basically what's going to be happening. And from the standpoint of the ratio of water and pigment and where things are going to go, and it is fun to once you sort of figure out basically how it's going to react, where it's going to flow. Then you can, for me, it's much more fun at that point to, you know, get into more crazy fun sorts of things, splashing, dropping color around, and then having a much better idea of how it's going to actually look when it dries. I suppose there's also the approach of just seeing what it looks like, and completely valid approach as well. So I've done a graded wash. I'm sort of propping it because I want it to be angled at a certain and drying at a certain angle. I'm not sure that I have the right angle there. I'm just going to do that. You know, now that I think about it, maybe you can't even see that. But hopefully you saw that. I'm going to let it dry like that. More later.